Hi, everyone. This is Kelly Scott Reed, and welcome to A Word, Ruff and Jan's interview show where I get to talk to creatives, writers, poets, filmmakers, podcasters, and those who make the magic that makes this life worth living. I'm happy to welcome Mark Harter. By trade, he works in information technology and is proud to have worked for Apple for 10 years. Those years went a long way to form who he is today. He's been a scoutmaster for his son's scout troop, a soccer coach for his daughter's team, an all around fan of football and sports in general. But most importantly, for our purposes, he is a very much a dog person. And that's where we come to his dog Gunner. In his all too short time with us, the senior Beagle made an incredible, indelible mark on his life and on his family. Gunner, a Beagle Story is the name of the book that we're going to be discussing. The love, life, and loss with the world's greatest beagle tells the story of being Gunner's person and ultimately hope through the cruel fate of losing him to cancer. Mark is local from Hilton, New York, where he grew up and still lives with his wife, daughter, and son, along with two rambunctious dogs, Ranger and Maisie. Welcome, welcome, welcome to A Word, Mark.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you very much for having me. And I look forward to having the conversation about Gunner, indeed, the world's greatest beagle, as I like to call him.
What made him so great?
Um, it's interesting. Gunner came to us very much in the later portion of his life. My wife found him on social media, and we already had a golden retriever at that point named Timber. Um, I was not necessarily looking to get another dog at that point because not having a fenced in yard, I was thinking more of the logistics. That's that IT side of me coming out. And I was like, okay. But once we got him, it's kind of chronicled in the book and everything. And he really gravitated to me. My wife, found him. She had the idea that he would be her dog, and Gunner had very much other ideas. I've never had a dog of my own that imprinted that much on me. And so much so that he became, we used to call him my barnacle, because wherever I went, he had to be. He was attached to me right from the very beginning.
That's really awesome. The dogs will do that. They'll find their person. What I find
Their
so
person, yep.
interesting about this particular relationship, I want to ask one question before I get asked this other one.
Sure.
Were you always a writer, or did this inspire you to write?
I was not always a writer. It's interesting. It kind of came about through posting to social media, and it inspired me to write. I have written some things, and we might talk about some of my future plans that span back years that now are coming into the future. But with Gunner, truly, it was a case of I found myself becoming a writer. I did not intend to become one. I wouldn't say by happenstance. As I was starting to chronicle our journey, the two of us, I started to realize that people wanted to hear more and more. Specifically, Gunner, him talking in the book, his voice, people really latched onto that. And that came through in the social media posts that preceded and became the genesis of the book.
So that was basically the catalyst for you, was that
Yep.
kind of online blogging, and people really responding positively
Yeah,
towards the
people,
book.
yeah, they loved hearing the journey of what the two of us were going through. Hearing things in Gunner's own words, and I don't really recall exactly how I came about doing it, but right from the very beginning. Much like a lot of people, we have our voices for our dogs, and we talk in a way that is particular to them. And Gunner had his own little way of talking that my wife and I would do for his voice. And that kind of came through in the post. And then I kind of came across the idea of Gunner's person, aka me, kind of filling in the story. So much so that people latched onto it. And then when I wrote it in the into the book form, it really kind of came across, as two people telling the same story.
What was the most surprising thing you learned about yourself while writing this book? I mean, writing a book is
Yeah.
it's a feat for
Yep.
people who write all the time. I write all
Yep.
the time, and I wouldn't even deign to look at writing a book. So, what
Yep.
was the most surprising thing you learned about yourself in the process?
Yeah, several things. You hit on one of them right off the bat. a lot of people talk about writing a book, and then they kind of set out to do it and they never finish it. And I used to say, oh, about 90%. And, one of the groups that I support has copywriters at my full-time job. And they were like, are you kidding me? 99.999% or some ungodly number of people will, start a book and never finish it, because it does take an incredible amount of work to get it to that finish line. I don't think people realize that writing the book in a way, maybe not so much of an emotional topic as this, is really the difficult part of that. I learned it on my second book, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. It's a very heavy lift, and it's not for the faint of heart. The second part about it that I learned is that apparently I did something right off the bat, not realizing it, being exceptionally difficult. Writing from two perspectives in the same book. I had done it like we just talked about in my my blog post, and I didn't think twice about it. But to do it in your first book is apparently another difficult thing. So apparently I like to do things difficult and not even know doing it right
Yeah.
off the bat. So to have a voice of Gunnar and then to have the voice of Gunnar's person telling the same story, people latched onto that and his mannerisms again. So yeah, it was not something I set out to do. It just kind of happened.
You remind me of my son who, when he learned to ride a two-wheeler, got on the bike and then took his hands off. That's it. We're like, you literally fall right down. You don't know what you're doing. He thought,
Yeah.
I'm gonna skip right to this. No, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Um,
it was a learning experience.
do you have any literary influences? If not, who do you look for inspiration?
So, with all the things you listed that I've done over the last, say, 10, 15 years, I haven't had a ton of time to read. But one of my biggest influences, one of my greatest genres is fantasy. I am a huge, huge fan of The Professor of Tolkien, of George R. R. Martin. I started reading the books through a great friend of mine, Jeff Gardner, got me influenced by those books when they first came out in the 90s. So I've been reading them since then. I've read them multiple times. Another one, a big one, is Jack White, the Camelot Chronicles. I thought he did a fantastic job of coming up with plausible reasons why the Arthurian legends are the way they are. I won't ruin it for anybody, but I highly recommend those books. It's a phenomenal series. I'm just going to be getting into Joe Abercrombie because I finally got some time to read, and people have been telling me that I would really enjoy those ones as well. But fantasy has been a huge, huge influence in my life, and those are some of my favorite authors right there.
It's funny you say fantasy, and of course you're writing in a fantastical way with
Yep.
this book,
Yes.
but it's such a real human thing. So I think that that's part of sometimes why fantasy for me sometimes feels remote, because it's so removed
Hmm.
from my reality. So that's what's good about what you're writing, is that it's firmly based in reality, but has this
Yes.
little fantastical edge. I think that's really cool how you combine those two things.
Yeah. It's very much like a chronicle of the first book, and I have a good tidbit that'll be shared along this video. My editor just got version 2 of the manuscript today for the next book, Gunnar a Beagle's Dreams, which will be the conclusion. Yeah, so it's
I
funny that
love
you
it.
mentioned fantasy. Yep, it's funny you mentioned fantasy because that becomes even a little bit more fantastical, but yet grounded in reality. If the first book is, the departure and my loss with Gunnar, the second book is how do you get over that? Because one of the things, a friend of mine who wrote a book at the same time, we were kind of like, each other's accountability partners to a degree of, getting each other to, hey, get over this hump, get over this, this hill type of thing. One of the things she had pointed out to me, she's like, unlike my book, she goes, you're going to have to be prepared for people to talk about their pet loss, even not dogs, type of thing, from here on out, you're going to be known as the dog guy. And I hadn't really thought about that, but I was like, okay, so when I've done some events here and there over the last year, that very much is the case where people want to talk about it. And it's actually helped some folks. Some folks who come to me and say, how do you get over the loss of a pet? And it's like, well, everybody's different. I do kind of delve into that in Gunnar a Beagle's Dreams a lot more. And that's, I don't want to say a release date because we all know how that can happen in the literary world, right? But it's close. So very much looking forward to getting that one out as well, too. So
Very cool. And I'll make sure I include all of that information when we release this as well, because I think it'll be
sure.
important for people to know. Was the most helpful criticism that you've received in your life, either for writing or in general?
Um, I can kind of answer that in both. So I'll start with general first. One of the greatest compliments I ever received was from a manager, and he said to me, he goes, "One of your greatest strengths is that you will only make a mistake once." And if you think about it, that's kind of a weird thing if you just didn't think about it. And that kind of helped me understand how I kind of function and stuff like that. That I'll try almost anything, learn from it, but yeah, I won't, fail that first time. So I think that kind of helped me in the writing type of situations where I was learning, how to become a writer. I'm still a novice writer, let's be honest. Even once I get out the second and my third book, I'm still early in on the stage. So that was kind of helpful. In terms of being a writer, I don't know. It's kind of hard to say. I was thinking about this the other day. I've heard of writers who agonize over every sentence and they're like, I can't remove that. My editor is telling me to remove that. Just the other day, I hacked out 1,000 words out of a section because I thought it was bad. So, I think that was kind of helpful to learn is that, you know, not everything you write is going to be great. And, feel free to get rid of it if it's not. So, and I hope that that's come through, that I try to, put the best story forward that I can. I'm sure I have plenty more to learn as a writer. Although I haven't read a ton of his books, Stephen King is another one that I've liked over the years. And, that continuum of being a pantser where you write by the seat of your pants or being an outline person. I'm somewhere in the middle. I can't write by the seat of my pants like him by any stretch. But one of the things that does resonate with me is when he says that no matter what you do, 1,000 to 2,000 words per day, you have to write it. If it's good, bad, and different somewhere in the middle, you just have to do it. It's like a muscle that you have to exercise. And if you want to become a good writer, you have to do it. So I'm hoping to get to that point.
I love that. Yeah, I read On Writing. It's one of the best books I've ever read, and I love him in general. His conservation of language and storytelling is fantastic. And I feel like when you're telling a story, like with about your dog, you are tapping into feelings. You want to express it. See, it's really hard to kill your darlings, as we just said in an interview prior.
Yep. Yep.
Um, but that's interesting. It's good advice. Um, Speaking of Gunner, in this book, you get inside the thoughts of Gunner, which is a risky proposition for writers
Yeah.
to try to truly understand of the mind of the main character, let
Yeah.
alone that of the dog, is difficult.
Yep.
So, how do you think you achieved this, and what was your process?
Yeah, kind of going back to what we talked about before, much like a lot of dog folks, you talk about your dog, what they're thinking. They can't obviously talk to you in English, but yet they understand quite a bit. They understand the cues from humans. There's the idea that some of their facial expressions are designed to convey stuff to us, right? Some will argue it's to manipulate us, and we let us, do that, which is fine because we love our dogs. I think because of that close bond between the two of us, and he was always by my side no matter where I went. I got to really understand him on a level that I don't think the rest of the family did, and that's probably why, why we were so tightly bonded and why I was able to write this story. For me, it felt very natural to look at it from the way Gunner would look at stuff, because to be quite honest, it was almost the same way I would look at things. There was very few things if I ate something that he wouldn't eat. There was very little things that if I did that he didn't want to do. So it was almost like a symbiotic relationship in a way, but a great one because we were so tight, and again, going back to that barnacle comment, he was attached to my hip. So for me, it didn't seem that weird, but going back to when, the copywriters at work said, you wrote two right off the bat, that's crazy. I didn't think twice about it. So, because he was him.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. So our interviews go about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, but I have a big one to ask you, and it's kind of
Yeah.
sort of related to writing. While preparing for an interview, I like to find the right vibe for each guest before preparing the questions. I listened to the song Heavenly Day by Patty Griffin before this interview, a song written for a dog. It is literally written for a dog. It's one of the most beautiful love songs I've ever heard. Look it up. Is there a warm up song, movie, TV show, or something you partake in before you write to stimulate your creative process?
Um, I find when I'm writing, if I'm listening to music, I tend to listen. I'll put something on either on Spotify or maybe YouTube that doesn't have ads on it or something that'll kind of fit the mood. Like right now, I'm starting to really gear up working on my fantasy series, so I'll put something on that's kind of akin to that. I've done some more mellow stuff when I've been writing for Gunners because I do need like when I'm cooking, if I'm doing stuff, I always like to have music on. And I talk about that in both the books, about the power of music and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So much so that it's funny, one of the pertinent questions people always ask me, sorry to digress for a little bit. I've been asked multiple times, what I sang to Gunner underneath a tree,
Yeah.
and it's in the book. And my answer is that that was between Gunner and I, and I'm not saying so.
I love that. That is not a digression. It's perfect because I want you to listen to that Patty Griffin song.
Okay, I will definitely
I
do that.
heard it.
Yep.
I heard it at a wedding. It was their song. I burst into tears. I barely knew the couple. I was so moved to tears. And then I listened to the live version. And in the live version, Patty Griffin said, I wrote this song for my dog. I'm not kidding. And then when
Yeah,
you hear
it's
it in
yeah,
that context,
sure.
it's the most beautiful thing in the whole. It's beautiful. I think you'll love it. I digress. I
No,
digress.
no, it's okay. It's
Tell
great. I
us,
mean,
tell us what's
yeah,
coming out for you, coming up, coming out for you.
yeah,
I want to hear about your series and the second book.
yeah. So I don't know if it's necessarily I've gotten the bug to write, but it's more of a case that I've got stories to tell. Like I said, coming out within the very near future is going to be Gunner a Beagle's Dreams. It's the conclusion to Gunner a Beagle's story, and it'll explain quite a bit. I do have a little bit more with Gunner. Originally, it was going to be a trilogy, but I kind of condensed it to two just when as I was writing along the way. So there's going to be I'm calling a companion volume called Gunner Unfinished Tales. See what I'm doing there, right? It's a little bit of a
Yeah.
nod to the professor. Yes, Professor Tolkien. It has some chapters that didn't make it into like book one or two or should have been. Some ones that that kind of give some author notes to it. I've got bios on the dogs, so it's really just to kind of fill out those spaces to it. Really to just kind of help with a reading of the first two. Um, but like I said, I'm really gearing up for my fantasy series. It's going to be planned as a trilogy. I'm switching software that I'm using because I need a little bit more robust to be able to do this because it's going to have a massive cast of characters. On the continuum, definitely not high fantasy like Lord of the Rings, but more towards the end of Game of Thrones. So it's going to be a little bit more gritty. So much so I wonder if, down the road, people like, this is the dog guy who wrote this. So, going to try to branch out a little bit and go from there. Because I have some, great influences from my friends that are, I've had since grade school. My friend, Jeff Gardner and Dave Beal. The two of them are great, great friends. We played D&D as kids. We still gather each week on Zoom calls and stuff like that, even though we live in different states. And what I'm anticipating is hopefully they'll be some of my advanced readers. I'm trying to think of the author who wrote The Martian. He actually did it where he released chapters to the internet, and people would critique it before he ever compiled into a book. So I'm kind of going to use my friends as that
I'm gonna
same
like
mode.
I'm gonna take a, is it, it's not Isaac Asimov, is it? Am I
No,
crazy?
Isaac Asimov's much older. This was recent. The
That's
Martian.
okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
it was.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, it was the movie with Mark Wahlberg. I cannot think of the author's name right now, but it was a great book.
Oh, yes,
Great
yes, yes,
movie.
yes. I
Yeah.
got it.
So I'm going to do that
Sorry about
same.
that.
No, that's okay. I'm going to do that same process with my friends because we kind of like the same thing. So I'll know if I'm in the right ballpark when I'm working on this. So my goal is by this time next year to have the manuscript done of that. It's going to be called The Dragon's Brood is the working title of it. It's targeting, it looks like it's going to be somewhere in the 600 to 700, maybe even 800 page realm. So
Wow.
I'm going to be jumping quite a bit and going from first person to third person. Apparently I just jump in with both feet. So
You're a glutton for punishment. I love it. I think
yeah.
it's great. But
Yep.
wow, yeah. I'm telling you, I am a short form person. I can write This long, an inch of writing.
Well, it's also interesting too because there was a lot of going back to the Gunner series. My wife is a fan of James Patterson. She's read a lot of his, and one of the things that she gave me as an idea is to make your Gunner chapter short. And I did that on purpose. There was a lot of thought from the way we made the look and feel. My great book designer, my editor, and stuff like that. We thought this through, like from front to back. In most of the chapters, it's a quick read. I've had people telling me that they read, the first book in, a single sitting, type of thing. So that was awesome. And keep your chapters short. Now, I don't know if I'm going to do that in my fantasy series, but, the second Gunner book will follow the same way.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad we finally got a chance to do it. It's such a pleasure. And I'm so excited that you're local.
Yeah.
I never ever get to talk to somebody who I could probably have sat in the same room. And maybe we
Right.
should do
Yep.
that sometime.
Sure. Yeah.
Do like a live reading or something. I would love that.
Yeah, definitely. It'd be cool because I still don't think of myself as an author. Like people will say that to me, and I'm like, I turn and I look. I'm like, who are you talking to? Type of thing. So it still doesn't seem real in a way.
Yeah, it's so cool. Well, I am so happy to have met you, and we'll talk soon. I hope again.
I would look forward to it. Thank you very much, Kelly.